Good morning. I want to talk now about the upcoming lunar month from about November 13th to December 12th, I believe, from one new moon to the next. In the process, I'll actually talk a little bit about things from the beginning of November all the way to the end of December. And I'll even make a few references back to the October 14th solar eclipse and how that's affecting things. But for the most part today, I'm going to talk about the impact of transits in general for the whole world. And later on, I'll do separate videos on how these transits will affect America, Israel, Iran, Hamas, and Putin, and maybe some other actors out there. Okay. But for now, let's see if I can go ahead and share my screen. And it just is going to take me a second to set things up here so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, and I think I'm good to go. The lunar month, November 13th, 2023 through December 12th, 2023. And like I said, I first want to go back to the solar eclipse on October 14th because there's some interesting things here. We have Mercury, Moon, and Sun all conjunct over here in Libra. And the planets in this conjunction, they're opposing Chiron in Aries. And Chiron's opposition to Mercury is exact to the degree, not to the minute, but to the degree. And this is all very interesting. Uh, as I keep pointing out, the real meaning of Chiron is it's a drive that urges us towards transcendence. The planetoid Chiron orbits between Saturn and Uranus, and as a result, it's like a bridge between the visible world and the invisible world. Astrologically or astronomically, we can go outside, look up in the sky, and we can see the planets from Sun through Saturn. They're part of our visible world. The planets beyond that, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, we can't see those with the naked eye. They're invisible to us. So, what happens is we have sort of our visible reality in front of us, but there is this drive inside us that urges us to seek more, to go beyond what is plainly visible and discover more about this universe. That is this drive towards transcendence that Chiron represents, but in the process, it often has to crack our hard Saturnian shells first before we can change. That is where the wounding associated with Chiron comes in. And so you have wounding that then has to be followed by healing and then by transcendence. On an individual level, there are some people who will frequently respond to Chiron by transcending in some way or another. But when we look at Chiron's application to the masses, it seems that most of the time wounding occurs. A smaller percentage of those of the people out there will experience healing, and an even smaller fraction will experience enlightenment or some sort of transcendence. So, this is a sort of a long way of roundabout way of saying that this eclipse has helped bring a lot of wounding into the world as if we didn't have enough already. And in October, that, of course, is when the war between Israel and Hamas broke out. And we have seen a tremendous amount of wounding on both sides since that conflict began. So that is where things are starting. That is the situation we find ourselves in. All right. Now, The next lunar month, it goes from about mid-November through mid-December. But I've got some charts and graphs here, which show positions of the planets and ingresses into signs, planets moving stationary at various times. And before looking at anything else, I want to talk about some sign changes that are going to occur anywhere in November or December. A few important conjunctions that will occur, and also when certain planets are going to go stationary, whether it's stationary retrograde or stationary direct. When a planet becomes stationary, it slows down to a standstill. It stops its motion. And when it does that, the things that planet represents, they become stronger in influence because whatever they're doing, they're stopped at this one position. They're just holding that position for quite a while before moving on. And so whatever its influence is, it tends to last longer and be a little bit more pronounced. So those are all important things to look at. So what's going on in terms of sign changes? Well, we start the month with Sun, Mercury, and Mars in Scorpio. Here, you might look at this and say, well, is that Venus in Scorpio? No, that's the glyph for Virgo, which looks uh, almost like the glyph for Scorpio, particularly when it's not really large type. But we've got Sun, Mercury, and Mars all in Scorpio. And that does not bode well for the world. Mars is in its home sign. It rules Scorpio along with Pluto. And when Mars is in Scorpio, it can inflame passions and strong feelings and lead to aggression and conflict and war. And having Sun and Mercury in that sign just adds fuel to the fire. So that is how the month of November is starting. There is a lot of aggression out there in the world right now. Fortunately, before we leave November behind, Venus moves into Libra, and Mercury, Sun, and Mars are all going to move into Sagittarius. It looks like Venus moves into Libra around the second week of November. If you look down here, you can find exact dates. It's going to be November 8th out here in Scottsdale, Arizona, that Venus moves into Libra. And that bodes well for the world because Libra is one of Venus's home signs. It feels very comfortable in Libra. And while in Libra, it often works to try and reduce tension and promote peace. Similarly, we're going to have, let's see, it looks like first Mercury will move into Sagittarius sometime in the second week of November, and then around the third week of November, the Sun moves into Sagittarius, and shortly thereafter, Mars is going to move into Sagittarius, and that is also going to bode well for the state of the world. With those planets in Scorpio, things are more militaristic. Emotions, feelings are running hot. Aggression is not checked so much. But when these planets move into Sagittarius, Sagittarius represents sort of like the group mind. So it can also refer to communicating with others, diplomacy, negotiations. Uh, Consequently, as we move from the beginning of November into the middle and then more so at the end, there may be more of a desire to end current conflicts and engage in some kind of negotiations in order to bring about some sort of peace. Now, all of this, of course, in the Middle East, it's easier said than done. It's hard enough between Ukraine and Russia. It's probably even harder in the Middle East because there is such a long history of conflict over there and people wanting to settle scores. So hopefully uh, tensions will be reduced and negotiations hopefully will succeed. Hopefully hostages will be released and all aggressions will stop. We may move a bit in that direction as November uh, progresses, but I can't promise that we're suddenly going to solve all the problems in the world. Now, let's see what else is going to happen. Uh, Later, we're going to have Mercury moving into Capricorn and Venus into Scorpio. And that is not necessarily good. Those things are going to happen in December. Mercury moves into Capricorn in early December. And that could signal a move from talking with others, Mercury and Sagittarius, to dictating to others, Mercury and Capricorn. Now, by mid-December, Mercury's going to turn retrograde, and by the latter part of December, it's going to move back into Sagittarius. Mercury retrograde might be a good thing. In mid-December, this might be a point where people realize that trying to dictate a solution or terms to others is not working. So whoever is doing that, they may stop, think about things for a while, and then when Mercury goes back into Sagittarius, things may get back into more fruitful negotiations of one sort or another. Now, a couple of other things going on we should take note of is Sun is going to be exactly conjunct Mars on November 17th, and that is going to happen. Uh, let's see, while both planets are still in Scorpio. That does not bode well for the world. That is going to be a very aggressive configuration. And Sun and Mars will still be pretty closely conjunct one another by the time of the first quarter moon on, I believe, November 20th. And so this whole period may be when tensions for the month really reach a peak. Okay, this may be the peak moment of tension during the month of November when things may be more aggressive. Okay, now let's see, toward the end of December, Mercury is going to be conjunct Mars on December 27th. Now, that also can add to aggression, but the good thing is at this point, both Mercury and Mars are going to be Sagittarius, in Sagittarius. Hence, rather than this being aggression carried out on the battlefield, it may be aggression carried out at the negotiating table. That's not great, but it's certainly better than people dying. So there is a good chance that this could lead to angry rhetoric, but anger between negotiators rather than soldiers. Well, we can only hope. The world is in a rather bad place right now with what's going on between Israel and Hamas, and things were bad enough with the war between uh, Russia and Ukraine. And there are several other trouble spots in the war in the world right now. America itself is still struggling somewhat with its democracy. But I'll talk about that in another video. Now, if we look at planets which are going stationary, well, Saturn is turning stationary direct right at the beginning of November, on November 3rd. So things having to do with restriction, regulation, frustration, those could be felt even more strongly uh, around the beginning of November. The good thing is it is moving direct. Saturn is in Pisces. At its best, this could help us turn dreams into concrete reality. And when Saturn is moving retrograde, well, that things are a little bit more internal. So those are sort of internal dreams or plans. But when it goes direct, that's when we might make those dreams a reality. And we might be able to turn some good dreams into reality. Neptune uh, turns stationary direct on December 6th. Neptune is in Pisces, its home sign. Again, this is great for dreams and visions. Uh, but Neptune is moving retrograde right now, so all those visions are internalized a bit more. After December 6th, maybe we have some inspiring visions that we can make a reality. Mercury will go retrograde on December 13th. And I already talked about how that might be a good thing because uh, Mercury will be in Capricorn at that time. And in whatever talks are being held, uh, some people may stop dictating and start listening and actually trying to engage in creative discussions again as Mercury retrogrades back into Sagittarius. At the very end of the year, Chiron will be stationary direct on December 26th. Chiron is in Aries, which rules the individual, but also being assertive and being aggressive. And so there is some concern over what kind of wounding may take place or be unleashed when Chiron slows down to a standstill and turns direct. I haven't looked at in detail, but later on I can go and look and see what kind of aspects is Chiron making to other planets on this day. If they're bad aspects, well, Chiron slowing down could be a bad thing. If they're good aspects, it could be a good thing. And then lastly, Jupiter will be stationary direct on December 30th, 2023. Jupiter is currently in Taurus, which has a lot to do with money, possessions, financial matters. And I am hopeful that when it turns direct, that maybe that will be beneficial to the economy and also to the stock market. It would be very nice for many of us, such as myself, many of us who are retired, if the stock market started going up again, since a lot of retirees depend upon the stock market for money in their portfolio, money for their retirement. So that's why I'm hoping for. Now, let me go back just one slide, back to that eclipse. There's one other thing I want to mention. Uh, as I've said, Chiron wants us to transcend, but in the process, it often winds up wounding us, cracking those hard shells. And Chiron is in a very, very strong opposition to Mercury. Uh, it's exact to the degree. Something I have noticed in my own life since this eclipse, and I'm wondering if other people have experienced this too. Uh, in terms of wounding and cracking shells, it seems like all sorts of little things have been breaking down and going haywire lately in my life, just one thing after another. It's like a Mercury retrograde times 10. I've had software problems just suddenly appear where there had been no problems before. A little electronic devices breaking down suddenly, losing internet connections, uh, faucets that never had a problem are now suddenly developing leaks. Plumbing problems are suddenly popping up. And the other day, yesterday, I was driving down the freeway when my right front tire just literally exploded. It was not an old tire, but I must have run over something that punctured it, and it just quickly blew up all around the whole thing. Fortunately, there was not much traffic on the freeway. I was near the shoulder. I could easily pull over. I had my AAA card with me. They came by very quickly. And the repair shop, where I get all my maintenance done on my car, it was just a couple of miles away. So everything turned out well, but this was just another incident of things suddenly breaking down. So I'm really kind of curious if, to those who are listening to this video, if you have been going through similar experiences that normally you might associate with Mercury retrograde. Uh, I hope not. It would be very nice if it's just me, but if it's everyone, then that might be associated with this strong opposition between Chiron and Mercury. Okay, let's go forward again. And if I go on to the next slide, if you're an astrologer and you're watching this video, this is a slide where you might want to hit the pause button and look at it for a little bit. I've got a lot of good information here. For the months of November and December, I'm showing all the, let's see, conjunctions, squares, and oppositions between planets, uh, dates when they are occurring, uh, their respective positions. So you can look over here at this table, see exactly when certain things are going to be conjunct or squaring or opposition. So that same information is given here. Here you can see some important aspects, tense aspects that Mars will be making to other planets. For these bars, I believe the orb being used is 1 degree. And then on the next slide, I have similar information. Uh, Here it shows a lot of conjunctions, squares, oppositions between planets for 2 months. The only uh, planet I essentially left out was the moon, because there are just too many of those. I've got a set for the moon, sun through Pluto, plus Chiron and the lunar nodes. And over here you can see these are 2 degree orbs, and you can see the dates on which things become exact. And you can see for uh, Sun conjunct Mars for 2 week orbits, or a 2 degree orbits, almost like a 2 week period, 1 week on either side of November 17th. So for my fellow astrologers or astrology aficionados, you might find these last 2 slides interesting. Okay, now here's what I want to do. I'm just going to look at what's going on transit-wise for the new moon, first quarter moon, full moon, and the third quarter moon. Those are times when things tend to be a little bit more tense than usual. And the tension that occurs at those times uh, affects, associated effects related to that tension have even been verified statistically. There's lots of statistical studies I've looked at the US government's PubMed website for these published medical studies of one sort or another. And a lot of studies have been done on the moon and phases of the moon, which show that there are indeed more stresses at the the new moon, the quarter moons, and the full moon. These are statistically verified. So I'll leave it to you to go out and search for those things. For now, we'll just talk about the transits. And at the new moon, the really big stressor is we have Sun, Moon, and Mars conjunct in Scorpio, no less. And they're all going to be in opposition to transiting Uranus down here. So this sets the tone for the month, and it's very militaristic. Not good at all. This happens on the 13th, and remember, a few days later on the 17th, the sun will be exactly conjunct Mars. And then at the first quarter moon on the 20th, it's still going to be in a fairly strong conjunction with Mars. So this represents a lot of aggression, a lot of strong feelings and tension in this lunar month. With Uranus in opposition to these planets, Uranus breaks up the existing pattern, causes sudden unexpected events to happen. And that does not sound good during a time of war. Now, on the plus side, there are lots and lots of beneficial sextiles and trines going on. And this suggests to me that there are people working day and night behind the scenes, trying to resolve tension in various parts of the world, uh, not only in the Middle East, but Russia, Ukraine, and elsewhere. There are people who are aware of the stresses, the tensions, and they're working actively to resolve them in different ways, either through helping with negotiations or just feeding the hungry and housing the homeless, taking care of the widow, the orphan, being kind to people, taking care of people in general. If you look at the blue lines here for sextiles and trines, you see several beneficial triangles involving one trine and two sextiles. And these represent all the people in the world working to resolve these problems. Now, there are also a couple of quincunxes that are important. Quincunx, that's a 150-degree aspect between planets. And it usually, it's an aspect that requires adjustment between two drives. So changes have to occur. It's like in negotiation where each side has to compromise a little bit, change a bit in order to arrive at some sort of resolution. And one of the things we have here is Chiron is making a fairly decent quincunx to the Sun, Moon, and Mars here. So this suggests there may be some adjustments that are made during the course of the wars going on uh, in order to take care of the wounded and accommodate refugees and displaced in some way. Uh, that would be something beneficial, I believe. Also, we have a configuration called a yod, which in this case involves Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter. That's when you have two planets, in this case, Venus and Mercury making a sextile to one another, and then both of them make a quincunx to a third planet, in this case, Jupiter here in Taurus. And uh, this may be, since Jupiter is in Taurus, and Taurus often has to do with finances, among other things, this may refer to adjustments that are made to try and help the world along financially, try and improve trade and commerce and things like that. And that has the potential of working out in a beneficial manner. So basically, the new moon, the new lunar month, it starts out on a very aggressive militaristic note, but there are people working behind the scenes uh, to try and resolve these tensions. And there will be people working to help the wounded and those displaced by war. There are going to be people working to try and help the global economy stabilize itself. Okay, now let's go on to the first quarter moon. This also does not look so good. Here we have the Sun and Mars are conjunct in Scorpio, exact to the degree. The exact conjunction was on November 17th, but 3 days later, that conjunction is still exact to the degree. There's still at the same degree. So this is going to heighten aggressive militaristic tensions in the world. To make matters worse, these two planets are being pretty strongly squared by Saturn and Moon over here. Moon is right at the end of Aquarius. Saturn's right at the beginning of Pisces. And this represents, Saturn and Mars are considered malefics, not happy planets. They actually represent important drives to get out of bed in the morning, drives to regulate ourselves in beneficial ways. But here they're not operating so beneficially and they're at odds with one another. That just tends to increase tensions and frustration. Now, if we take into account the signs these planets are in, Aquarius tends to be a humanitarian sign. Pisces is a compassionate sign. The stress or tension here might be between those who are intent on waging war and those who want to deliver humanitarian supplies and compassionate relief to refugees. And these may be at odds with one another. Now, in addition to this, we also have Venus in opposition to Chiron. And this could lead to more wounding at this time if we're not uh, fortunate in this. Uh, Venus in Libra wants peace. Chiron, whoops, let me go back a slide. Chiron in Aries can be more assertive, more aggressive, could be enlightenment, more likely to be wounding, and then hopefully followed by healing. So people may be feeling even more so the stresses of war uh, and the problems associated with that. But again, we also still have lots of beneficial sextiles and trines represented by the blue lines here. You can see Mercury making a trine to Chiron and a sextile to Venus. Both of those are pretty strong. This, with Mercury now in Sagittarius, this could represent negotiations to try and help the wounded and those who are suffering. So uh, things are still very militaristic. Things are very frustrating, but there are people behind the scenes working on these problems and trying to reduce tension. Okay, now let's see. On November 27th, we have the full moon. Let's see what's going on here. Well, unfortunately, Sun and Mars, they're still pretty tightly conjunct. They're only 2 degrees apart after all this time. So Sun conjunct Mars, that is going to be a pretty constant theme throughout most of this next lunar month. The good thing, however, uh, is that they are in Sagittarius rather than Scorpio. So this may help move things on from fighting to negotiations. The moon is in Gemini, which is also about talking and communication. Uh, There is a square, a fairly strong square from Saturn to both sides of this opposition, to the moon and to the sun and Mars. Uh, but Saturn is in Pisces, and Pisces is a sign of compassion. So, uh, even though you never really want to see a square between Saturn and Mars, those two malefics, in this case, this might be a sign of difficult negotiations rather than difficult war. Uh, I hope that is the case. I hope that by the time we get to the end of November, that we are moving on more into negotiations of some sort. If so, because of the square from Saturn and the sun still being conjunct Mars, these are probably going to be difficult talks. They're not going to be easy. Also, you've got Mercury strongly squaring Saturn, and I'm sorry, squaring Neptune. And that suggests that in these talks or discussions, there will be a certain amount of misinformation or deception going on. And that also will make things more difficult. Now, let's see what else we have going on here. Uh, throughout, well, let's see, we have Venus conjunct uh, the south node and opposition to the north node. That is going to intensify situations surrounding Venus, and Venus is also going to be part of a yod involving Neptune, Uranus, and Venus. So we have Uranus and Neptune making a sextile to one another, both of them making a quincunx to Venus. And remember the quincunx, it's an aspect that pushes us toward making adjustments or change. In this case, uh, it may be a mixture of creativity and compassion coming together to bring forth novel solutions that might lead to peace, uh, as represented by Venus and Libra. Okay, now let's see. What else do we have going on here? Well, we still have several beneficial sextiles and trines. So people behind the scenes working to resolve all of these tensions. And this time we're going to have Mercury making a trine to the north node, a sextile to the south node, and to Venus. So, and with Mercury and Sagittarius, maybe some progress can be made through negotiations and through talking rather than fighting and killing. Okay, and let's see if we have anything else here. Uh, well, that's about it. Pluto, it's throughout it's been making us squares to the lunar nodal axis, but that's been fading. Uh, that gets weaker and weaker over time, and Pluto is getting closer and closer to moving back into Aquarius. So this may raise the intensity of the situation a bit, but I find other things going on a bit more important here. Okay, so let's move on now to the third quarter. And let's see, we have Sun and Mars square the moon. Uh, but the good thing is, even though Sun and Mars are in conjunction, it's not that close a conjunction anymore. We've got 5 degrees of separation between them. So there's a big difference between that and being exactly conjunct or just 2 degrees apart. Likewise, Mars does square the moon, but that square it's about 5 degrees of orb from being exact. So it's not quite as bothersome right now. So with these planets in Sagittarius, hopefully we'll be undergoing negotiations. With Moon in Virgo, there will be extra attention played to the details of whatever's going on. Negotiations, if any are going on, they're still going to be difficult. And we have a fairly strong square now between Pluto and Venus. And let's see, it looks like Venus is, it's going to be right at the beginning of Scorpio now. So that's when it's moving from being more peaceful into Libra to uh, using its right brain to decide on those long held positions that it feels that this is the right position. I should take this position. That's what's right. I shouldn't budge from it. And with a square from Pluto, there will be some people with power elsewhere who will want to bring about some sort of change. Uh, we also have, again, several beneficial sextiles and trines going on, representing those in the background, working to resolve all these tensions. We also have a quincunx from Jupiter to this Sun Mars conjunction in Sagittarius. So uh, the world may make some adjustments financially based upon uh, the various conflicts around the world. Well, again, there's a good chance that by the time uh, we get to the latter part of November and to this third quarter moon, that the conflict may not be as hot as it is today in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas. I certainly hope so. There is, as I always say, astrology basically gives us a weather report. It doesn't really tell us what's going to happen because what actually happens depends upon what decisions people make, and people have free will. But just looking at the weather report, it's certainly the case that there was wounding in October around the time of that solar eclipse when you had Chiron in opposition to the sun and the moon. And there are specific reasons why that wounding took place in Israel. I discussed that in another video on this, the astrological origins of this war between Israel and Hamas. When we get into November, uh, passions are running very hot. They may reach a crescendo between the 13th and the 20th. On the 17th, we have that exact conjunction between Sun and Mars. But as the month continues, negotiations may take hold. They will probably be very difficult, very contentious, but hopefully progress will be made. And let's see. So, to recap, November begins with conditions that favor war and aggression. Aggression may peak around the time of the Sun-Mars conjunction, the full moon, the 17th through the 20th of November. Negotiations may increase, though, as more planets move from Scorpio into Sagittarius. In the last week of November and throughout the lunar month, a series of beneficial sextiles and trines will aid the efforts of diplomats and others to reduce tensions. Okay, let me stop sharing. And that's my general astrological forecast for the lunar month, going from mid-November through mid-December, though I've covered a lot at the beginning of November and a lot at the end of December also. And I've related problems during this upcoming lunar month to the problems that began around the time of the solar eclipse in October. And again, I'll talk about it in another video on more about what was going on astrologically on the 7th when Hamas attacked, but that's for later. This is just for the world in general. So it looks like passions will run hot for a while, but hopefully they'll cool and hopefully negotiations will begin and hopefully they'll be constructive, though I expect that they will be very difficult. In the meantime, what can we do as individuals? Well, we can be kind to ourselves. We can be kind to others. We can give, even if it's just a little bit, we should all give regularly to charity. Even if it's just $1 a month that we give to the food bank, that all helps. Anything you can do to help others will help make this world a better place. And we have to do good things, not only in terms of good actions to make this a better and kinder world. It's also helpful, I believe, to, as we used to say, to visualize world peace. Uh, not only pray for peace, not only visualize light breaking up the darkness within ourselves and within certain parts of the world, uh, but also going within to come up with creative visions that can lead to peace. Times are troubling now, but this is also a time to plant seeds for peace and for a better future. And I personally believe that there exists a sort of spiritual quantum entanglement where, on other levels, we are all connected with one another. And this is the level at which the love that we put out in our hearts can go and touch everyone in the world and transform that darkness into light. And even if that's not the case, even if we're not so connected, uh, then if you, when you go to the store, go out in the world, if you're kind to other people, they in turn will be more likely to be kind to others, who will then be kind to even more people. And so it all spreads in that way. So let's all resolve to do that, to do what we can in these troubled times, try and make it a better world. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you will join me for the others I do on this lunar month in America, Israel, Hamas, Iran, Putin, and maybe others. And I hope to visit with you again. So in the meantime, I'll stop recording. I'll just say so long. Take care of yourself, be kind to yourself and others, and be well.